Hello? Can you guys hear me? Can you see me? Okay, sounds good. Hello, everyone. Phil, could you give me a quick update? What was the last thing you shared? Okay, all right, sounds good. So, Phil started off sharing a couple of the principles of leadership. I'm going to actually go ahead and talk about modeling the way. Now, modeling the way is really important to leadership. In fact, I think it's inherent. It's an inherent principle in leadership. The book talks about that managers are not always effective leaders. In fact, it says that some administrators, managers, and even top executives are extremely successful, but are not good good leaders. Now, why is that? Well, first off, I want to get a few things clear. One, managers and leaders are both vitally important, but the processes between the differences between leadership processes and management processes are pretty apparent. For instance, management, as the book says, typically has to do with the day-to-day things, whereas leadership has an inherent principle of effectively orchestrating important change. And change is extremely important. If you don't change, you die, basically, in business. Things are always evolving, things are always happening. The world is constantly changing, and there will always be change. The only thing constant in life is change. For instance, I'll give you an example. There are several VHS makers that are out of business now. And some of them have continued in business because they continued to stay on top of technological change, and were able to see that the CD or the DVD was coming on the market, and were able to shift their business model to help and produce those. That's important, because if they didn't change, then they ended up like some of the other companies. Now, an important thing about change is it's not always, people typically don't like change. People like to stay settled. So you have to have followers, and that's the next principle. Followers are important. The book says that executives are given subordinates, but they have to earn followers. So how do you earn followers? Especially when in the book it also talks about that there are good managers and bad managers. There's also good followers and bad followers. So how do you get good followers? You have to model the way. You have to show them how it's done. You can't just go and give orders or goals and quotas and then not do anything yourself, because you're not going to get anything that way. Now, there's a couple other principles that are really important in leadership. Some of the processes that we're going to continue to talk about. One of them is decision making. It's a tendency for a person who is striving to be a good leader to believe that in order to be a good leader, you have to be in charge of making all the decisions. This is not always the case. Yes, it's true that you typically as a leader would make the final decision, but there's two styles. There's autocratic and there's democratic decision making. Now, autocratic is when you basically make the decisions without polling any views or opinions from the group. You make the decision, that's the way it is, and you go with your best judgment. Democratic is when you poll from the group. You talk about things, you brainstorm, then you come up with an idea, and then you make the decision. Some leaders have a tendency to feel that maybe that's giving too much power away, but it's not. I love the quote that none of us are as smart as all of us. In other words, there's not one person in a group who's smarter than the whole group put together. So it's extremely important when you're making decisions to pull from the group. And lastly, we're going to talk about this model that I'm going to go ahead and pull up on the screen. Now, I failed to mention, but if you look up here, I'm using Skype, but it's Skype Extreme. You can download it for free. It allows me to pop up videos and graphics and things if you've been wondering how I've been able to do that on Skype. It's an awesome new program I designed, not really. Anyway, so here's the model. Now, the model goes over three different types of or three important aspects of leadership. It talks about relationships, talks about task and structure, and then it also talks about your orientation or your power position with those that you are leading. So as you can see here, it's important to have a good relationship. You can see the giant difference it makes between having a poor relationship and a good relationship. But as you get down here, there's an interesting thing here. If you look here, and it drops down, you have good relationship, but you have an unstructured and low power. And down at the bottom here, it says that you are relationship oriented. I want to spend just a minute on this. As you move up on this scale, you actually, as you become more effective as a leader, you become more task oriented. This can sometimes be uncomfortable for those who are relationship oriented. For instance, I struggle with this sometimes. Sometimes it's difficult to draw the line between having a great relationship with your employees and staying on task. But I can assure you that it's extremely important to learn how to become task oriented and to draw that line to where you have those that care about you and you care about them and you've built that relationship, but that they understand that business is the important thing, that the goals and plans that you've set out are the things that are most important. Now, lastly, what I want to do is I want to share an example of a good leader. There's so many good leaders out there. We could talk about Winston Churchill, Abraham Lincoln. We could talk about Ashoka, the king in India that we learned about in the presentation earlier about leadership. Now, the one I want to focus on real quick for just a moment is George Washington. George Washington was someone who truly modeled the way. And the experience I want to share with you is the Valley Forge experience. Valley Forge was a time when people they were camped in Valley Forge. They were kind of stuck, and it was winter. Many people were losing their lives. They were hungry, they weren't clothed well, and it was a very difficult and trying time for the troops. George Washington refused special accommodations. He didn't feel that it was right for him to be in a nice cozy cabin while everyone else was suffering and freezing outside. Eventually they were all able to build cabins for everyone and be able to house the soldiers. But the important thing is that George Washington was willing to stay out in the cold and show the soldiers that he was willing to do what he said. And I'm going to leave you on that principle. This is a quote that my mission president told me. This is something my mission president told me, and as we continue on throughout this process in this presentation, I want you to keep this in mind. He told me, he looked in my eyes and he said, "Elder Nelson, never ask anyone to do anything that you're not willing to do yourself." And there's such power in that. If you want to be an effective leader, follow the principles we talk about today and don't ever ask anyone to do anything you're not willing to do yourself. That's the difference between managing and leading, or being a great leader. Instead of just spitting out quotas and goals and then going ahead and doing your own thing, leaders get down in there, they help where they can, they do what they can, and they try their best to model the way. No one will work harder than you do as a leader, and so you've got to continue to model that way. So I appreciate the time here. We've actually got to run. I'm representing Saif, but you continue to listen. I know Michelle's got a lot of great things to talk about, Satoru and Phil. So thank you so much. It's good to see you guys.